Thank you for being here, Dean. As stories go, yours is really quite remarkable, and I can't wait to share it with everyone. So I appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. I couldn't wait to talk to you, especially with all that you're doing for the cancer and chronic illness community. And one of the things I tell everybody is it's really nice to be on this side of that story.
Yeah, the other side of the story. And
Right.
I think what you're doing too with how you share your story and how you go about things is it's all about trying to reach behind you and help the people that are coming along, who haven't been through it yet or faced with a scary diagnosis and don't know
Right.
what to do next. I mean, I just think if we can do anything to help those people, then we're doing a good job.
Well, what's the use of having overcome that kind of challenge if you can't reach back and help those that are going through it at the present time? You're right.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to have a good time today.
Yeah.
Let's let the audience know a little bit. Before you came on, I just decided to just read pretty much the high points that we'll be talking about today from your resume,
Okay.
because there's so much. And I want to first just talk about your history.
Sure.
We know that you were diagnosed with cancer in 2006.
Right.
But let's talk about your life before that and just
Mhm.
kind of what led up to that and what, we all have our lives before something like that happens. And I always say that until your health is, or your loved one's health is in question, you don't really have a bad day,
Right.
You don't have a bad
And
day.
I certainly didn't. I've always been a pretty happy guy. I was lucky enough to grow up here in Oregon in the 60s, which makes me really old. But I was so fortunate because both of my parents were mountain climbers, even my mom. She was up there on the slopes, mixing it up with the guys, hanging with them, which was very different for a housewife of the 60s. And so I got to spend most of my childhood, every free moment they got, we were out in the wildest of places climbing peaks. And so for me, it was just kind of an idyllic childhood. I couldn't have asked for anything better.
So when you were diagnosed with cancer in 2006,
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing then because of your lifestyle and having, been taking care of yourself over the years, it was one of those diagnoses that didn't make sense, because sometimes it's just going to happen no matter what you try to do to prevent it.
Yeah, it really didn't. I had been living, the only thing that made sense is I went out to Kansas to play ball on a whim, not knowing I'd fall in love with a cute little Kansas farm girl and put myself in exile for love. Because I don't know if you've ever been to Kansas, but there aren't too many mountains to climb
Yes.
there. But she was worth it, and it made sense in that there's so much heavy pesticide use
Mm-hmm.
among the wheat farmers and in those rural areas. Uh, so that kind of made sense, but it was shocking to me because I'm the guy that I never smoked, I never drank, I never took drugs. I wasn't a cute little choir boy by any stretch of the imagination, but I being raised by such active, fit parents, and them being such wonderful role models of fitness. That's what I did. I got into triathlons and really stayed fit and watched what I ate. The only thing that the only other thing that made sense was I always worked 2 or 3 jobs. If they'd have had ADD back in the 60s, I'd have been heavily medicated because I've always had a lot of energy. And so I would work a lot thinking I was paying my dues and being a good guy and helping my wife and I to really build wealth and so because I on the average slept only about 4 hours a night my whole life, that part of it kind of made sense.
Yeah, we know a lot about sleep now, don't we, that we didn't know
Yeah,
before?
we do.
I mean, we do. It's important to know it too.
Right.
Let's talk then. So you were diagnosed with, tell me the full name of it so I don't get it wrong.
Chronic lymphocytic leukemia.
In 2006.
4 days before Christmas in 2006.
And you were diagnosed with both well, you were in a bad way, and that you were diagnosed with both the chronic and
The acute.
the acute.
For the
And
first 2 weeks. Yeah, they said they'd never seen anything like it, and they were really scared because it was so anomalous, and the numbers were increasing so rapidly. They didn't know what to do, and so they said, "You just gotta hope and pray it goes one way or the other, because if it does, then we kinda know what to do, but both, we've never seen anything like it."
Mhm.
And thankfully, it after about 2.5 weeks, it felt like 2.5 years, it slid over into the chronic side, which is less deadly and gave us more time. So we all breathed a sigh of relief until we remembered that I was still very, very sick.
That's the thing about it is, the type of cancer that I had, Hodgkin's disease, is very uh, successfully treated if found early.
Mm,
And there's a very high statistic, of success. And I've been alive for 26 years since having
wow.
cancer. But the people who fall on the other side of the statistic aren't less dead just because it's a highly treatable cancer, right? So
Mm.
I really understood that I wanted to give it my all this one time, and give it my best, and hopefully never see that time in my life again. And so far, I've been very blessed in that way. You have had long bouts of remission,
Right.
and then you were doing very well,
Mhm.
and your wife passed.
Right.
And your wife passed in 2009, 2008,
2010,
2010.
15 days before our 30th anniversary.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. We've talked
Oh,
about that off air, but I will
right.
say it again. And so you feel like your health took a turn from the
Oh,
grief and the stress that
absolutely.
induced. Hmm.
Yeah. I don't just feel like it. I mean, it was very obvious.
Sure.
I very quickly by 2011 was out of remission. The leukemia came back with a vengeance and brought with it lymphoma, small cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is almost always associated with chronic lymphocytic leukemia. They kind of are a one-two punch. And I was just very, very sick and very, very lost.
Very, very
And
sad. Yeah, that's a
oh,
hard,
yeah.
yeah.
And I lived in this, I moved to her tiny little town of 13,000, a small little rural community only 4 miles from the Oklahoma border. And if you didn't grow up there, no matter how much you were invested, everybody was really friendly. But since my grandparents weren't born there, I was an outsider. And so even after 30 years, people referred to me as Mary's husband. And I was always happy with that. That was a good gig. But I had no idea how much that had influenced my whole adult identity. And
Mhm.
all of a sudden, when I wasn't Mary's husband, I didn't know what to do with myself.
I can relate to that in a big way. And I've written about it too, that I didn't really know who I was without Wesley, my late husband, who
Right.
passed in 2004. We met as kids. We grew up and got married. We had a baby, despite my cancer. And
Wow.
so I remember just thinking, oh, this is the only plan I had for myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Me too.
now
I
what?
was only 21 when I got married, but I tell everybody I was 21 going on 12, like most of us guys.
He raised you.
So I guess I could join you when I say we met as kids as
Yes.
well.
Yes, that's funny. Well, let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the things that you have done in your life and what you've learned over time that have
Sure.
been instrumental in your healing. We'll
Right.
be back in just a moment. I mentioned, Dean, that you are from Oregon when I introduced you at the beginning of the show.
Mhm.
And I want to mention again your book, The Wild Cure From Death to Life on Oregon's Longest River. And we're going to
Right.
get to that part of your story. But first, I want to talk about what led to your river story.
Sure.
And that is part of the work that you've done in your education.
Right.
And your interest in the things, I'm guessing, that your parents exposed you to very early on in life that you couldn't have known would have a healing effect on you later.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just being out in the Cascade Mountain Range all my childhood made me extremely comfortable with adventuring out in the wilderness and being out in the wildest of places. As a matter of fact, I saw the effect on their lives and their stress and even their relationship, how they were always close and they loved each other. But after a couple days out, they were just symbiotic almost. It was
Mm.
a beautiful thing to see. Even as a little kid, I could tell there was a difference, something kind of magical happening when we were out in the wilderness. And so rather than being scared that I was going to be eaten by a bear or something, I've always seen that as almost my primary home rather than a secondary place.
Well, I would like to talk to you when we're done off air. If you could teach me how to not be afraid of being eaten by a bear, I might spend more time out there. When you and I were setting up the schedule to talk today, messaging back and forth on Instagram, you said, I'm about out of range. I spend every day, every Friday in the wilderness.
Right.
And you didn't say, I go for a hike, I go to a trail. You said the wilderness.
Right.
And so tell me, what is the wilderness to you?
The wilderness to me is any place way off the trail where most people don't go, out of cell phone range, where I'm never going to see or hear anyone. And my favorite places are way up on a mountain ridge, or more ideally, is way inside a forest, off the beaten path, by a glacier fed river or stream where, when I go out there, I can see my footprints from 2 months ago, but no one else's.
No one else has been
Yeah.
there.
Nope.
Yeah, that's deep in the wilderness.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's I don't I have an adventurous side of me, of myself. I'm pretty sure I do. I like to think that I do, but that isn't one of them.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. My dad gave me a card once when I was moving off to the city for college and things, and he was just talking, about being aware of my surroundings, and I honestly have felt safer at times in New York City
Wow.
walking back from my hotel at night from a Broadway show. I know how to do that. I know how to like walk with a group, even though you're not with a group. I know how to not be distracted by my phone. I know how to get into my car. I do the best I can, right, to be safe. But the wilderness is still, I think I can learn a lot from you and from your book and just from your practice of how important it is. So let's talk about the sounds of the wilderness and the
Right.
healing properties that you've discovered that were really always there.
Yeah, they've always been there. I didn't discover them.
You
I
discovered
found
them for
out about
yourself.
them.
Yeah.
I discovered them for myself. Yes. Uh, yeah. I mean, there's just so much to unpack there, but I am a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist. I got additional certifications in anxiety and trauma very early on in the late 90s and working with trauma. I just intuitively knew sitting and talking about it wasn't enough. As a matter of fact, as we would sit and unpack and talk, particularly with men or combat veterans, I saw their symptoms escalate. And so early on, what I started doing with a lot of my combat veterans is meeting them anywhere, even in a suburb. And rather than sitting and talking, we would walk around. And
Mhm.
just being up, moving
Moving.
forward, walking helped. I've since learned that sitting is the second most powerless position, only eclipsed by kneeling. That's why kidnappers, when they're taking hostages, they'll make a person kneel because it puts them in total submission
Mm.
to the subconscious mind. But why on earth would we sit and put ourselves in a very powerless position and then talk about what we're feeling powerless about? And
Yeah.
so
I
I'm a
hadn't really
big
thought of it that way,
fan,
but
and I really think the future of therapy needs to be much more active and upright and walking or moving forward in some way, because that signals to the subconscious that we are in power and we're moving forward in our lives and in our movement. But I also got very interested. This shows you how geeky I am. Very interested in a field called neuroacoustics. It's a scientific study of the therapeutic use of sound and vibrational frequencies hitting various areas of the brain and how those affect the emotions and our subconscious body systems, our autonomic body systems, how they respond. And so I did a lot of work in that area clinically, and I very quickly found, even back around 2003, 2004, studies about how the vibrational frequencies or the sound waves that the body and mind react to the most and the deepest are from nature. And this is probably mostly just common sense to most people. Everybody loves the sound of waves lapping onto the shore. Everybody loves the sound of wind going through the pine trees or hearing a chime. But what a lot of people don't know that I just found out a couple years ago is honeybees, when they're buzzing around a hive, hit a certain vibrational frequency at the note or tone of C. And they found that if you spend time listening to that, it boosts your immune system and does all sorts of things. There's so much going on out in nature that we would never guess. As a matter of fact, there's a fairly new field called eco-psychology. It's the study of how nature heals trauma and other wounds, emotionally and psychologically. And so I really started reading a lot on that and started taking couples out to Sedona and different places, hiking them around as early as 2004. So I had those early experiences before even my cancer diagnosis.
And you're utilizing that space for the treatment of your patients instead of sitting in a room, like you said, and you started to see different kinds of results.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Both with my men that I worked with, and then especially with my couples. I could work with couples for a year or two, and it seems like we're just beating our head against the wall. I could take them out into the forest or the canyon lands and put them on a trail, and we'd make more headway in 6 days than we had in 6 months, just by who took the trail first, who's walking and who's following. I mean, you just, they don't realize it, but simple things like that tell you so much.
Interesting. Fascinating, really.
Yeah, it really is.
I want to take a break and I want to talk in detail about your 184-mile swim.
Sure.
Why you did it and how you did it. We're talking with Dean. The title of the book is The Wild Cure: From Death to Life on Oregon's Longest Trail. Dean, I want to make sure we get to your story about what you wrote about in the book, The Wild Cure, and your swim. I know that you shared with me off camera that you had spent quite a few years really struggling with finding your purpose, wanting to be a good role model for your daughter as your parents were for you. And you had dreamed as a kid of making some big climbs like Mount Everest and other things that you wanted to do in nature, and ultimately decided to bring it home and do something locally and take this swim that started off small and became much bigger. Let's talk about, how does one swim 184 miles? Well, I know that you did 3 to 5 marathons a day for 22 days.
Yeah,
but
yeah. As an active cancer patient,
technical how. But that's the how. But tell us, how really does someone go 184 miles, and what was driving you and why you did it?
Well, the thing that was driving me that no one knew at the time is I figured out that if, number one, I needed a purpose. Purpose is fundamental to doing anything, especially to healing something like cancer. You've got to have a passionate dream that eclipses your chronic illness. And I knew that if I could find something bigger than my illness, it would give me a chance to recover. And what I didn't tell anyone at the time is I felt like, here's my sweet daughter who just lost her mama, scared to death because I was down to 152 pounds and I'm 6'1.5". I was skeletal. And I knew if I swam 184 miles, she'd relax. Because if I could swim that
If you
far,
could do that,
I'm probably going to live.
Yes.
But more importantly, I wanted to inspire other cancer patients to refuse to give up or be defined simply by their diagnosis. And I've always been a real believer that actions speak louder than words. And so if I became the first person in history to swim the entire length of our biggest river here in Oregon, that would speak volumes and maybe inspire other cancer patients. Because having been through just an extremely bleak 3 years, I know how important it is to be inspired by those that are maybe just a little farther. And so that's what I did. I swam for 22 days, 3 to 5 marathons a day, which averaged 10 to 14 miles and 40-degree water.
And was your leukemia active when you started this?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And by the end of it,
and so was my lymphoma.
Okay. And so by the end of it, you had radical remission of both illnesses.
No, I had radical remission of the leukemia and didn't know it. I just knew I felt better. And I had never heard of cold water immersion or Wim Hof or anything that happens when the body's in hypothermia. But later, I found those things out. And the reason I even started looking with my oncologist is here I had chronic lymphocytic leukemia. It's not ever supposed to go away. I went down to the world's number 3, University of California, San Diego, world's number 3 researcher in chronic lymphocytic leukemia, wonderful man named Dr. Juanerio Castro. And he said, Dean, if I hadn't diagnosed you myself, I would have thought you'd been misdiagnosed. In 30 years, I've never seen it go away. I can't find it at all.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I feel like there's so many. I feel like I should have you on for 2 episodes.
I'd love to. I'm in.
So, we're just going to keep talking. So what we're going to do is we're going to say goodbye right now because we're out of time.
Sure.
And then we're going to come back with you next week for more show.
Oh,
Is that cool? Do you have time for that?
That's more than cool. That's an honor. Thank you.
Because there's no way I want to cut you off right now. So we're going to go for now. And we're going to take a deeper dive into more of Dean's story when you come back next week. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, yeah, that's fun.